Hey guys, Barrett here with Spec of Tech. Welcome to the channel. In today's review video, we're going to have some fun. We're going to do some sound demos and also talk about the sound quality of the SVS Ultra Evolution bookshelf speaker. If you guys are looking for the specs and the overview of the speaker, I did do an overview video. I'll link that in the top right hand corner if you'd like to check that out after this video. But this video is not about the specs at all. If you want to know the specs, you can either click on the link down below and it'll take you to the SVS website, which lists all the specs of the speaker, or you can click on the video that I already linked in the top right hand corner. Today, I just want to talk about the sound quality, the build quality, and the aesthetic of the speaker. And of course, I'm going to show you guys some sound demos. But is the SVS Ultra Evolution bookshelf speaker truly an evolution of the previous SVS Ultra bookshelf speaker? We're also going to talk about that in a future video. I am going to compare this speaker to the previous version, the SVS Ultra bookshelf, and we're going to talk about the sound quality, and of course I will do some sound demo comparisons for you on that video, so make sure you stay tuned on the channel for that video. But in today's video, let's focus on the SVS Ultra Evolution bookshelf speaker. So let's talk about the treble first of all. So I did several hours of listening with the speaker in my room, and the equipment that I was using is the Eversolo DMP A6 music streamer, which was connected to the Eversolo Z8 DAC, which I believe uses the ESS 9038 Pro DAC, which was connected to the TONEWINNER AD1PA 2-channel amplifier, which provides you with either Class A or Class AB power, and in this case I was using Class AB because that's what I preferred, and it's putting out 300 watts per channel into the speakers. And I'm the type of person that does listen to a wide variety of music. I listen to different genres, but I also pick specific music to test out a speaker in specific aspects of its abilities. And I have to admit that the high end of this speaker performed very well with all the songs that I threw at it. It's kind of a great performer in an all-around sense, but the treble or the high end of this speaker is significantly detailed. Like I stated in the overview video, I do feel that there is a slight bump in the treble region of this speaker, just to give it a little bit more airiness, but I did notice that there's a little bit of sizzle, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean that there's a little boost. There's a little bit of that high-end airiness sizzle in this speaker that I believe they did on purpose with the tuning of the crossover. But you will be greeted with an adequate amount of detail and transparency with this speaker, especially when considering its price point. I think that it is on par, maybe even a little bit better than on par for its transparency and detail in the high end. When listening to Madonna's Vogue, which is a song that I choose to test out not only the treble but also the soundstage and imaging of a speaker, the reason I choose this song to test out the treble is because the treble in the song is a little bit hot. So if there's too much of a bump in the treble, you are going to hear it. It is going to be a little bit harsh. It might be a little bit hard on your ears, but it is going to be fatiguing over time, especially with this song. And what I found with the SVS Ultra Evo bookshelf is that it wasn't too much of a bump in the treble. So yes, you do get a little bit of airiness. Yes, you do get a little bit of sizzle at the top, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but you're still going to be able to listen to songs like this without it being overbearing or too harsh on your ears. But this song did show that these speakers have a little bit more of a forward treble to them. It's not kind of in your face or shouty. That's not what I'm trying to say here, but it's a little bit more forward. It has a little bit of depth to it. It also showcased how crisp and clean and detailed the high end can be for these speakers. I do believe them to perform slightly above their price point when it comes to their high end detail and transparency. Synthesized treble sounds and things like cymbals do have a nice crisp, clean sound to them, and they do also have a nice decay. So if you're the type of person that does like a little bit of a bump in the treble region, you want there to be a little bit of airiness, maybe a little bit of sizzle at the top, but not to the point where it's overbearing or harsh. I think that SVS did a great job here, but I don't want you to come away from this review thinking that this speaker is very bright or it's very boosted in the treble. I do feel that this speaker is pretty close to neutral, but like I said, I think there's a slight bump in the treble, and I do believe that there's also a slight bump in the bass region as well. But before we talk about the bass, let's talk about the mid-range, because it's actually something that impressed me with this speaker. When I was listening to songs with great vocals like Adele's Hello or Teddy Swim's Lose Control, these speakers handled it very well. The vocals were just crisp and clean. They had a richness to them. The vocals were just quite separated from the rest of the sounds. And I think that's a great word to use for the mid-range of these speakers is separation. There is some nice separation between the vocals and the sounds, or the rest of the sounds going on in the song, which is nice to see in a pair of speakers in this price range. I think that most of you out there would be pleasantly surprised with the mid-range of this bookshelf speaker. Keeping in mind that it is a two-way bookshelf speaker, I think most of you would be impressed with the mid-range clarity and separation. When I was listening to Teddy Swim's Lose Control, there was a nice richness to his voice. The center image was fantastic. It was just lasered in, but at the same time, it was very open and broad. It was kind of room-filling when it came to his vocals. The same can be said about pretty much any song with great vocals, but another one that really stood out to me was Adele's Hello. The mid-range of these speakers is very detailed. detailed, like I said, but it's also nice and rich. It's very room filling. It has a kind of a big, large sound to it, almost like you're listening to a tower speaker. And one thing that's worth repeating is that there is a nice amount of separation between the sounds and the vocals with this speaker. All in all, I think that the mid-range is very well done. I think SVS did a great job here. There's a good amount of detail. There's a good amount of separation between the sounds. There is some nice richness to it. It does vocals justice. It does sound fantastic. And like I said, it is very room filling, and it does have sort of a broad sound to the mid-range, which brings us now to the low end. So obviously that 6.5-inch woofer does have to handle the mid-range as well as the low end on this speaker. Now, in my opinion, for the most part, any bookshelf speaker should be paired with a nice subwoofer, even if it's just a small subwoofer, just to kind of fill in that low end. Now, I know that some of you out there are going to be in apartments or condos and you don't want a whole lot of bass, and I completely understand that. And that's something that a bookshelf is actually pretty good at. You're not going to get a whole lot of bass out of a bookshelf speaker. You're not going to get room filling, chest thumping bass. And that remains true with the SVS Ultra Evo bookshelf here. It's not something that's going to stand out. It does have an adequate amount of bass. Like I said, it's pretty much on par with something that you would expect in this price point or this size of speaker. It's not going to be something that's going to blow you away, but it does have some nice clean bass. If you're just in a small room, or if you're going to have it in an apartment or a condo, it does have some nice clean punchy bass for a bookshelf speaker. But with that said, of course, it's not going to give you that chest thumping, shake your room kind of bass. If that's what you're expecting, then a bookshelf speaker alone is not going to do it for you. You're going to want to pair it with a subwoofer. And like I said, I always recommend pairing a bookshelf with a subwoofer if you're able to do so. If you're in an apartment or a condo, I kind of understand not wanting to do that. But in that case, I think that you should probably get like a smaller tower speaker that's going to have a little bit better bass than a bookshelf speaker like this. But with all that out of the way, the bass on the SVS Ultra Evo is pretty clean. It's pretty tight. It does have a little bit of a punch to it. Like I said, you're not going to feel it in the chest, but it does have some punch. I listened to a song called NDA by Billie Eilish, and the reason I choose that song is because it has a really punchy bass to it. It's just kind of hard hitting, and with a really capable tower speaker, you are going to feel it with in your chest. With a really capable subwoofer as well, you're going to feel it in your chest. You're going to feel that tactile punch. But with these speakers, like I said, you're not going to feel that. But it did have a nice punch to it. It did have a nice little hard hitting that was on the verge of you being able to feel it in your chest. Like you could kind of sense it was there at louder volumes, but you don't want to push it too hard. Now that's when a speaker like this is going to kind of fall apart. If you're looking to be able to crank bass heavy music and just turn it up to 11, that's not something that a speaker like this, and that pretty much goes for all bookshelf speakers, not just the SVS Ultra Evo alone. It kind of applies across the board to bookshelf speakers. You're not going to get that performance. So if you're going to crank things up to 11 on bass heavy music, you're going to get distortion with this speaker and pretty much every bookshelf speaker out there, and even a lot of tower speakers if they're not that capable, to be honest. But if you are going to listen at moderate volumes and you do want a little bit of that punchy bass, this will give it to you. Like I said, with Billie Eilish's NDA, it did have that punch on the verge of you being able to feel it. I could kind of feel it a little bit in my chest, but not that noticeable, but it is there. I played another song that I like to test bass out, and that's Kill Shot by Eminem, and that's because it does have some low end to it. I believe it's below 30 hertz. I'm not sure exactly where it lies, but it's definitely below 30 hertz, and then it also has a little bit of that punchy bass as well, so it kind of tests it both. It tests the capabilities of being able to provide that punch while giving you some rumble. And that's where you can really tell that these speakers do roll off, because that low end that I was talking about in Kill Shot isn't really there. You get a little bit of the rumble in the higher frequencies, but as soon as it tries to go low, these just roll right off, which most bookshelves are going to do. There's not going to be a whole lot of bookshelves that are going to be able to provide that low end that I'm talking about in Kill Shot. If you have capable towers, you have a capable subwoofer, you'll know what I'm talking about with that song. But that's where you can really tell these speakers aren't going to give you that low end performance that if you're expecting room shaking bass, you're not going to get that from this bookshelf speaker. And that song kind of highlighted that, and it just proved that. But if you are going to listen to music that has a kick drum or it has kind of that chest thump bass like NDA, it is going to give you some of that. Some of you might be satisfied, like I said, in a smaller room, or if you're in a condo and apartment, you might be satisfied with that amount of bass. But for the most part, I think most of you out there are going to want to pair these with a subwoofer just to fill in that low end a little bit more and give you a little bit more of that punch. So to sum up the bass and just to wrap it up, what you're getting for bass is adequate for a bookshelf speaker. It is sufficiently clean. It's sufficiently detailed. It's not going to be over and above. I don't think it punches above its price point. I think the bass on this speaker is right about where you'd expect it to be for its price point. It's not great, but it's not bad either. It's right where you expect it to be. Before we get into the sound demo so that you can hear them for yourselves, let's talk about the soundstage and imaging, because it is something that really stood out about these speakers. It's not exceptional, but it's definitely punching above its price point, I feel, because I did get a little bit of height out of them as well. Some speakers, they perform a little bit lower, so the soundstage a little bit lower, almost on eye level. These kind of felt like there was a stage, and you're looking up at the stage, and you're kind of in a live performance, so you have to look up a little bit to get the soundstage of these speakers. So when they're playing their instruments, it is a little bit higher up, which I kind of like because it has some height to the soundstage. And yes, sounds can come from lower down, but I think in Hotel California, because it is a live performance, it is recorded with them, being up on the stage. So you kind of get that feeling from this song. But the clapping on that song, so there's a little bit of a guitar solo, which sounded nice with this mid-range. It was nice and separated from the rest of the sounds. But after that guitar solo in the beginning, there's some clapping. And it's something that I pointed out as being exceptional with my Legacy Aris Tower speakers, because it was coming up from basically right above me and to the left. You could hear this clapping. And with the SVS Ultra, no, it wasn't as good with the Legacy Aries. Of course not. Those speakers are significantly more expensive than these, but it was still pretty impressive. It did come from my ceiling, and it did come from the left-hand side of my ceiling. It wasn't quite as far back, so it didn't have the same depth as the Legacy Aries, but it did have depth. And it did come farther back than some of the other bookshelf speakers that I've experienced in my room. So the soundstage with that song in particular was really good. And like I said, it is a live recording, so at the end of the song, there is a lot of clapping. And it kind of just wraps around you. It fills the room. It's nice and broad. It makes you feel like you're really there. It was pretty clean. It was pretty accurate. It did sound, real to life. I mean, obviously I have heard better and more expensive speakers, but for their price point, I think they performed very well, and the sound staging was something that stood out. So like I stated earlier, there's another song that I like to test out soundstage and imaging, and that's Madonna's Vogue. In the beginning of the song, she says, "What are you looking at?" And it pans from the left-hand side of the room to the right-hand side of the room. And again, these speakers performed very well. I was quite impressed with how broad the soundstage was for that part of the song. It went all the way from the left-hand wall to my right-hand wall of my room. And then about 30 seconds into that song, there's a snapping finger sound that comes from the ceiling, but from kind of the front left-hand corner of the room. And then there's also a drum sound that's happening at the same time, and that's coming from higher up on your right-hand wall. And again, these speakers performed very well. I'd say slightly above their price point when it comes to soundstage and imaging when listening to those songs in particular. And I believe that some of their soundstage and imaging abilities come from the fact that they have that separation in the mid-range that I was talking about earlier that I believe punches a little bit above their price point. So because of that separation, you can kind of hear things a little bit more clearer in certain parts of the song, or where they're coming from in certain parts of the song, whereas a lesser bookshelf speaker is going to kind of blend those sounds, so you're not going to hear exactly where it's coming from as clearly as a speaker like this that does have a little bit more of a separation between those sounds. Now that we've talked about the sound quality, let's give you guys an opportunity to hear them for yourselves. Now keep in mind that I'm not using any subwoofers, and I was not using any room calibration for these sound demos. I also want you to keep in mind that my recording equipment, my room, as well as the device that you're listening on is going to greatly affect the sound. Not to mention that YouTube does compress the audio, so that is also going to affect the sound. So this isn't going to be an accurate depiction of what I was hearing in my room, but I did do my best. And something really cool that I like doing for my audio demos is I am going to use a binaural microphone for these recordings. So you are going to hear some of the soundstage and imaging, at least more so than if I was using just a stereo microphone. But make sure that you are using a good set of headphones for the best experience, because then you are going to be able to pick out a little bit of that sound staging and a little bit of that imaging. Obviously, it's not going to be as good as what we're hearing in the room, but it is as good as I can get over YouTube.
You said you needed space.
I hope you guys did enjoy those demos, and for those of you that did use a good set of headphones, let me know if that binaural microphone recording is worth it, or were you able to pick up some of the soundstage and imaging? Drop your comments down below and let me know. Now that we've covered the most important thing, which is the sound quality of these speakers, and you guys had an opportunity to hear them for yourselves, let's talk about the build quality, because it's still something that needs to be covered with these speakers, as well as the aesthetic. So first things first for me, you guys know that I like my magnetic grills, so I'm glad to see that SVS included a magnetic grill with these speakers. No more peg and grommet, which to me is just kind of outdated technology. It's kind of pointless. I mean, how much can a few magnets cost? I don't think it costs a whole lot. So in a speaker at this price point, it's good to see that they're including them, which they didn't include them in their previous version of the SVS Ultra bookshelf. Other than that magnetic grill, I actually do like the aesthetic of the speaker. As you can see, they do have that nice curved or angled front baffle, and that does coincide with the back baffle as well. You have that nice curve or angle there. The back of the speaker, not much can be said here. You got a plastic port. Pretty standard stuff for a bookshelf speaker. One thing that I would like to see them improve on is this plastic terminal cup. It would be nice to see either a brushed aluminum or just something made of metal, just to give it a little bit more of a premium feel. This plastic cup is something that they used on their previous speaker, and it's definitely something I feel like they could have upgraded on this version. But other than that, that's pretty much my only complaint about the looks of this speaker. One thing that they did change is the surround around the tweeter. It's just now a flat black metal plate, which looks nice enough, and it serves the purpose. I did prefer the previous version that had the rings machined into the metal. It just had a little bit more of a premium look. Not that this looks bad again, but it just, to me, doesn't look as nice. I do like this cellular lattice, I believe is what they call it on their website. That's protecting the tweeter. It does serve a purpose as well, but it does kind of look neat. It's a little bit something unique about the speaker. I've never seen one that looks exactly like that. So it's always nice to see something unique on a speaker like that. One thing that did stand out to me about the aesthetic is the finish on this speaker. I think they did an exceptional job on the finish. It was very smooth. Like the gloss white does make it more difficult for you to see blemishes or to see dust for that matter, or fingerprints. Under the right light you can still see it, but for the most part it is more difficult to see. But under bright light I was expecting to see more orange peel, but it was a pretty smooth finish, and it was something that kind of stood out to me. It's you know, an attention to detail that they wanted the finish to look smooth and they wanted it to look good. And they accomplished that, and it looks very nice. Now, granted, some people might say that the Evolution series of speakers is kind of copying some other brands like Focal with that front baffle or that curved front baffle, but there is some nice lines to this speaker that does give it an aesthetic appeal. Like the previous version of the Ultra did have this as well, but the chamfered edge, which does give it a nice line on the front. It does look good to me. I like the look. It gives it kind of an industrial modern look to it. I feel it does serve a purpose for deflection, like I said, but the design and shape of this cabinet is a nice looking cabinet. I think it does have a premium kind of high-end look to it, I guess is a good way to put it. Now, for me personally, I've never really had a white speaker before, so I wanted to try white in this instance, and it's kind of growing on me for two reasons. One, you can't really see dust on it. And two, you can't really see fingerprints as easy. So if those of you out there that, you know, fingerprints really bug you about gloss black, or having to constantly wipe them down really bugs you about gloss black, you might want to consider gloss white, because those two problems are definitely minimized when it comes to the white finish, because it's much harder to see. Again, if you do shine a lot of light on it, you can still see fingerprints and dust, of course, but it's definitely harder to see. I think SVS did a good job with the design and aesthetic of this speaker. I think for the most part, people are going to like the way it looks. Now, of course, there's going to be those of you out there that don't like the choices that SVS made for the cabinet design. Everything is subjective when it comes to looks and audio, so not everybody's going to like it, but I think for the most part, generally speaking, most consumers, most customers are going to enjoy the look of this speaker. So to sum it all up, I think that SVS did a great job with the sound of this speaker. You're getting that detailed high end that I talk about that does have a little bit of a bump to it. You get the detailed and separated mid-range that I discussed. Bass-wise, it's going to be adequate. I think it's on par for what you get in anything in this price range. It's not going to blow you away, but it is adequate for a bookshelf speaker. I always do recommend a subwoofer with a bookshelf speaker anyway. Aesthetically, I feel like it's pleasing. It's a well-built cabinet. It's a well-built speaker. And I think that they do put a little bit of effort into the components on the inside of the speaker, at least according to their website. Like they did use silver tinsel leads for the tweeter, and they are proud of the crossover that they use. I'm sure that not all of the components of the crossover are going to be top-notch quality, but they do try to put some quality parts into their crossover, which is nice to see. So all in all, I think they've built a speaker that's worth its price. And like I said, I do feel that certain aspects of this speaker does punch above its price point. I think that you're getting a aesthetically pleasing looking speaker that has a little bit more of a premium look, in my opinion, for the price point. So all around, I think that SVS did a great job with this speaker, and it's something that a lot of you are going to be very happy with if you do decide to purchase this speaker. If you're curious of how this speaker stacks up against the previous SVS Ultra bookshelf speaker, make sure you stay tuned on the channel because that video is coming. So if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. Tick the bell icon so that you are notified when that video drops. And please take just one short second to hit that like button. I always do appreciate it. Remember to enjoy your systems. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.